If you want better photos, you've got to conquer your fear of switching out of auto. Here's a quick guide to your camera's other modes. The good news is that almost all cameras share a set of modes that carry the same function no matter what the brand. If you're just starting out and want to tread lightly, a good place to start is with Program Auto Mode. It's a capital P on the dial. Think of P mode as mostly automatic. The camera will determine your exposure, but if you want, you can override it by controlling something called exposure compensation. It's a way of telling the camera to simply make things brighter or darker and letting the camera worry about what settings are changed. Next up are the two siblings, Aperture Priority and Shutter Priority. Most brands label Aperture Priority as A and Shutter Priority as S. Makes sense. Canon labels Aperture Priority as AV for aperture value and Shutter Priority as TV for time value. In both these modes, the camera still chooses how your scene is exposed, but you control which setting is changed based on the look you're going for. Consider what you're taking photos of. If it's a portrait or any subject that you want to stand out in the foreground while the background remains blurred, use Aperture Priority. This will let you change the f-stop. A lower f-stop number will give you a shallower depth of field, which means blurrier background, while a higher f-stop number will keep more of the scene in focus. If you're shooting action, sports, or anything that moves, it's time to choose Shutter Priority mode. This puts you in control of shutter speed, which affects motion blur. If you want to freeze your subject perfectly in time, faster shutter speeds like 1/500th, 1/1000th, or 1/8000th of a second will do the trick. If your shutter speed is too low and you don't have a tripod, you'll end up with blurry photos. Notice that in both these modes, even though you're changing settings, the exposure stays the same. It's still calculated by the camera. You can use exposure compensation if you want to make the scene brighter or darker. Finally, there's full manual mode, where you have complete control over exposure by choosing each setting yourself. It's the only mode that doesn't rely on the camera to determine some aspect of the photo you take, but it does take time and practice to master. We're almost done, but there's one last factor to consider: ISO. In all of these modes, you can either choose to control ISO yourself or leave it in auto. If you're in low light, higher ISO can give you more flexibility to change your other settings in order to get the look you want, but it will introduce more noise to your image. Until you're more comfortable with your modes and your settings, it's fine to leave ISO in auto in most situations. Choosing a mode is all about what look you're going for with your photos. Spend some time shooting in each mode and you'll end up with a better understanding of your camera and an easier time getting your photos to look exactly how you want.